Welcome back on how to build a landing page in Tailwind CSS. This is the second part of the video. If you haven't checked out the first part, I recommend to do that first, and here you find a link. And if you're completely new to Tailwind, I also created a get started video on how to get started with Tailwind CSS, also linked at the top. So, but with no further ado, let's jump in. Just a quick recap what we have done last time. So we built this navigation at the top here where we added the site name. We have added 3 links with some hover effects, and then we also built this nice header section here where we had the CTA of the basic landing page here with the button to check out the work and this nice illustration on the right side. Today we want to look at those other section, which is the portfolio section, where we have some images or work to show off, and then we also have an about section, simply image and some text, and at the bottom we have some form to fill out. All right, if we look at the code, you are hopefully familiar with that one. So let's jump in and create the portfolio section. So before I do that, what we actually need is the separator we have in here in our design, which is this green line. We could do it in 2 ways. We could either use a container here from this portfolio and just add a border at the top here. Or we just can add a separate div in here and we are just adding the border here, or we could also add a line in HTML. But let's first create this container for the portfolio. So we need a div. And this div, of course, should have a class for the container, so that everything which is within the div is limited to the borders. Then inside that container we need a heading, and it's important that we are taking the h2 this time, because we already have an h1 at the top. And this says just portfolio. Then we have a text below that, which is some introductional text. I will go simply and get some lorem ipsum tool. Nice and perfect. And we'll just paste that in. All right. Let's take a look at the page. Yeah, of course we added the container, but the container of course is not centered. So what we need to do, and let me zoom in again so you can see it a bit better and maybe reduce this a bit. We need, of course, the MX auto exactly, you know it. And then we get a centered container here. Then as you can see, also the H2 is not styled in any way. So what we need to do, we need to go into our style CSS, because this makes some sense now, since as said also in the last time, the H2 will be reused, for example, in the other sections as the about and contact me, and we don't want to write all those classes again and again. So we just style, we just style the H2 itself. So let's take a text, I guess that's a 4XL maybe, margin bottom 8, and the font Nunito bold. All right, and then let's check that. It's 48 pixels. Is it the same? No, that was 64, 48. Could be also 5XL. Let's check. Run the build for the CSS. And if that's done, we can check it. All right, that's actually 36. Yeah, it's a 5XL. But all right. Nice. Okay, then we have our portfolio section with some introductional text, as we have here. And this is actually also a little bit bigger. It's 24 pixels. And then let's add to this specific paragraph the text 24 is 2XL. Okay, then we have another section below there. And maybe we also need to get some margins around. Let's maybe take 24 in this case, so that we get some white space on the top and bottom. Okay, and then we need some those images at the bottom, yeah, our showcase basically. For that, so normally, of course, you would probably integrate something like a library here or whatever, a slider, something. Since I want to focus here on Tailwind CSS and not showing some kind of a library or coding JS here, I will jump over that and just include two showcases here. So I will basically redo that section a little bit different. So I will create a div here, and that div will contain a flex row. And then we are going to have a div and another div, and those should get then a background for the images. And for that, I quickly need to download them. And then again, we go to our tailwind.config.js and add this background as we did with the hero pattern to portfolio work background portal, like that. And then we are adding this one to the background, portfolio work background. That's an SVG. Awesome. And then we can use that as a background in here. So it's BG and then portfolio work background. Maybe not the best naming, since BG and background is the same. So let's check out what we got. Until currently nothing, of course, because we don't have any height or anything in here. A different way, which I might want to show you, is the grid you can use also in Tailwind CSS. So besides the Flexbox, we also have the grid layout. So this you will find, yeah, it's in the same category, Flexbox and grid. And in here you can define grids. So you define here the columns, how many columns you want to have in your grid. So in this, if we take 2 columns, what we need, then we would define each div below that as 1 column span. So basically 50% of the space. And then there's also the gap. So the gap is the size or the white space between your columns. And you can define that as well. And you can define it for the X and the Y axis. So that's pretty handy. So maybe we, instead of using Flexbox, let's use the grid So grid calls, we need 2 in here, and call span is 1 for this one, call span is 1 for that one as well, and then we also want to have a gap of, let's say, 8. Still nothing, of course, because we don't have anything defined in here. Okay, I just took an image from the design we had as our portfolio image. So that one would be portfolio 1 PNG. And of course it's in images. Okay. Wonderful. And there we go. We have like those 2 images in here. Of course, you should always add like an alternative text to your images. So don't forget to do that. And that should be descriptive. And let's add some padding to this whole container. Now let's add some margin top and bottom. Perfect. Okay, our images are allowed to be 459 pixels wide and 286 pixels high. So since we are not going to achieve that easily with the RAM, and also because that should stick to that width, what we are going to do is we will add a width to the config. So again, we go to the width, we go to customize, and then we can go to extend. And let's copy that. Add this one here. Add the missing bracket. And then we can say like, all right, that should be 9.5. And that's 495 pixels. 495 pixels. And the same goes with the height. Copy, not cut. Height. And of course we shouldn't copy the extend. All right, and here we needed 285. Okay, so what I can do now, I just can use the width and the height with the class. So I can go to my image and add width 495 and height 285. And then I do this with both images and they should get resized after we build the CSS, of course. Okay, so what we need to do as well is the images in our design, they should have rounded edges. So we need to add the class rounded. Then our background, of course, is not finished, so we need to get the BG cover, BG no repeat, and BG center, so that our background image is covered, centered, and doesn't repeat itself. Then the padding top should be 4, but the padding left needs around 3 rem. And okay, and then I just realized that we also don't need the paddings here. We actually need them on the image, and we shouldn't use paddings here, we should use margins. So we want to have this image centered in this background things. So we use the MX auto. And then the only padding we need at the top is a padding Y, which is like maybe 8 to test that. Yeah, that looks okay, I guess. Of course, there would be better ways with that. As said, normally you would build that with JavaScript and load those your work somehow dynamically from somewhere, from a database. All right, then we need another div, and this time we are going to have the about section. And in the about section, we need the container, we need the MX auto, and we also want to have the same amount of margin. Okay, and actually we should limit that to a margin Y, and so that we don't have a smaller container. And then let's go into, and we actually again need an H2 which says about, and then we need a paragraph, I guess, or was it? I'm not sure. Okay, it was directly the image and the text. So in here again we could use a grid. We could use Flexbox. Let's use Flexbox for this one again. And then we need this image. Actually, the image, it should be basically the same as here. And then we also need this paragraph. And the paragraph again contains some lorem ipsum for us. All right, and what will happen now is that our image is basically very squashed. First reason is, of course, there's no call span this time, but also because it's basically Flex auto is used, and because of that much of the text, it will just squash that image. So to prevent that, we add a flex 1 in here, and then we also add a flex 1 in here, and this tells Flexbox that both should be, yeah, basically are the same of importance. And then we take the item center again so that the text is centered to the image. Of course, in here there would be more text, but we also need again the text 2XL. And now there's a point reached where I would say let's move this style for that into here, text 2XL, and remove it from those paragraphs because we are using this all the time. And then we can save some rewriting and just leave the additional classes we have for single paragraphs in there. Perfect. And of course we need to rebuild the CSS. That's about the about section. Of course, what we also need for those elements later on is those background images. It's basically, we can just add this to the wrapping container. Okay, then go into the Tailwind configuration, copy this one, add 1, 2, 3, and form. Then save that. And then we go to our container exactly, and this is the about, so bg about pattern. Let's take a quick look at what we have added into our original header. So the whole thing, bg cover. This time we really want to cover the image, bg no repeat, bg center. Exactly. So the standard ones. And then save it. And let's do the same for the portfolio. And rebuild the CSS because we changed the config. And then go back. Yeah, could be more beautiful. I guess in this case, for a landing page like this, it would make sense to add a common, for the body, one background images, which keeps repeating itself. We can try that later. But first, let's add the last section. And the last section is our form. MX auto, and in here we need, what do we need? A text. Okay, so the heading, again, contact me. Then we need the paragraph. We grab some lorem ipsum text. Okay, and then we need the form. And the form should contain 1, 2, 3, 4 4 input fields. Input 1, input 2, input 3, and the text area field. Okay. And here we can use the same approach as always. So we could use here, the simple Flexbox. We could use a grid to display that form. Currently, it's not displayed at all. Do we want to do it with grid again? Let's show the grid again. Grid calls 2 and a gap of 4. And this one gets the call span. The first one is 2. Then class call span 1. Class call span 1. And the text area field is again call span 2. Okay, then let's take a look. Still no form. Let's quickly add some stuff to the form. I will quickly do that. So that's done. We still have no form. Actually we do have a form, but Tailwind CSS doesn't offer any styling for that. So, but you can see already we have the contact me, we have the text. Then we have the form, then we have the call span 2, which is of course crushed now, and we need to change that because those classes need to be at the top level wrapper, which is in this case the label. And let's actually not do it in here. Let's go back to our styling, our style sheet, and define the input. And here we want to have a padding. In total, let's just add randomly 4. Then we want to have a background color. Going to add the BG. I already forgot the name. Form background. Form background and BG border bottom 1 border. Actually the border color is the text color, which we could use here as well. So text should be form field border. Ideal name for that for now, but it is what it is. Okay, and now let's build the CSS. There we go. There we have our input fields. The text area field isn't styled yet, but we can apply the same to the text area. Okay, so the padding is actually a bit too much, but the rest is okay. But the border doesn't show up as expected, which is just border and then the border color we want to use. Building, and then now we have our green border at the bottom. Now we have to deal with the size. The size of that whole thing is a lot bigger. So I guess it should be enough if we apply here a width and then full. It should be adding the width 100%, and that should stretch everything to the maximum width. In here, we don't want to have a maximum width of 100. We could also cheat in here a bit, for now at least, and use a type hidden field, which we probably would use in a form anyway. Create a honeypot for bots, honeypot. So if this field is filled out, we don't get the request or we don't count it because a normal user doesn't see it. Could also do that. And then our field is also tied to the correct width. Then in our design, does the field actually have any... It has a big padding here or margin. So let's add the margin top of maybe 32. Well done. And then we also are still missing our labels. In general, those fields are a little bit bigger and they also have rounded edges. So let's quickly add that as well. Rounded corners. The height is much higher, so let's add a padding Y to 4. Okay, and then let's build the CSS again. And of course, you're missing the submit button at the bottom. Yeah, that's more as our form should look like. The gap is actually bigger, so let's add in here again a bigger gap of 8. Let's double that. And then at the bottom, we add a button. And this button is a type submit button, and it says contact me. And then we add some classes to it. It should be in this pink, so add that color as well. Okay, so VG form button background. Then it has probably a padding of maybe 4. Text is center. Text is also white. And it's rounded. So let's take a look at the button. Nothing happened. Like the text is white and everything, but the background color is missing because I missed to build the CSS again, of course. There we go, we have our button. And then to the whole container, we also need some margin top and bottom. As always, let's add the 24 pixels. Nice. And in here, it's the same thing, like it's basically the same button as we already have at the top. So we could also just rebuild that button from the top. So I could go in here and just copy it. So all those classes, but it's actually attached to an anchor link. But in this case, we want to have an actual button. So what I could do is I create a custom class. So I copy that or cut it out and use the class button as we did with the links. Use the apply keyword, add all the classes, hit save, and at the bottom here we get rid of everything here. and just add the class button. Then we rebuild it and we have another component in our code. So we have the links as a component and we have the button as a component, which is here as well. Here now is the difference. As you can see, this button is limited to the width of how many content is in there, but the submit button is actually stretched to the width completely. And last time we limited that with max. So we get rid of that in the component and add it to that specific button in here. So if we rebuild the CSS, this button will be stretched to the width it has, and this button will be still limited. So we need to add to this button span 2. All right, and then we have added our form, the contact me section, the about section, and the portfolio section. I don't still like the margins, and this is also something I can get rid of and be like, that is let's call it wrapper apply, and there we go. Then we don't have to rewrite it all the time as we would have done now. Wrapper. And we also can make sure that all the divs we are using the same amount of padding and margins and so on. Okay, let's quickly add to the last part here, the background image. So we have the wrapper, and now we need our background form. How did we go? Pattern, BG cover, BG non-repeat. There we go. Yeah, and that's it. And if we want to stretch those BGs a bit more, which I think makes sense, we simply change the margin to a padding and rebuild the CSS. And then our containers are bigger, and therefore the background illustrations have more space to live, and it's actually looking better. Yeah, that's how you can build a landing page with Tailwind. Yeah, so I hope you learned something today, and don't forget to like the video if you did, and subscribe to my channel if you don't want to miss any further videos. And let me know in the comments below if you are going to test now Tailwind CSS. I really can recommend it. And if you don't, it's fine as well. In the meantime, you can maybe watch that video or this one. Yeah, so that's it. Bye.